All right, here we are with less than 24 hours to go before we have some spectacular weather, spectacular spring migration. I really focus in on the weather a lot because I like a look into the future to pick out when these really exciting events are going to be. With less than 24 hours to go, it's pretty painfully obvious that the next 2 or 3 days, 18, 21 degrees, southwest winds are going to be good for spring migration. I think the real beauty comes in knowing back on March 31st or April 1st when I did that good video that somewhere in this time frame things were looking quite promising. At that time, there were two weather events that had potential. One pretty much fell off the map and was not good whatsoever, and this one just kept getting better and better. So it's kind of like a neat little way to plan, my next 7 to 10 days, and try and make sure I get whatever it is I need to get done to make sure I'm available to hit this weather. But even still, with such a short period of time to go, I find a lot of these little weather tools can be quite useful for planning what exactly the best day is going to be, or what group of birds I'd like to target. So we have west winds today on Saturday. Very clearly, southwest wind Sunday, southwest Monday, southwest Tuesday, west again Wednesday. These winds are not created equal. I really like to take a look at some of the weather wind maps that exist out there. This is the Windy TVTY. Not really sure what to call it, but so here it is, Saturday at 10 a.m. So it said west winds. You can see there's sort of a northerly component to this. It's not ideal. We can jump ahead each day around the same time frame. I'm going to hone in probably more on Burlington, Hamilton area for this video, just because that's where I intend to bird. 10 o'clock south winds on Sunday, Monday 10 o'clock, again south winds, Tuesday at 10 o'clock. See, things have turned a little more westerly, but still south. So this is the surface level for each of these maps. I'm just going to reverse backwards here and show how once you get a bit up off the ground, so I'm going to go to 750 meters off of the surface. This is the height that a lot of birds are going to be migrating at. Shorebirds and hawks will be even higher than this. And suddenly we go from that gentle west wind to a stiff north-northwest wind over this part of the world. So you can see why I had not identified Saturday as being particularly interesting. If we jump ahead to the same time on Sunday, suddenly this map explodes with these really long distance southwest winds. So surface winds, weather network looked fairly similar. Clearly this day is going to be bringing the birds. It's the same thing for Monday. If we jump ahead, it adjusts a little bit. You can tell the air mass is moving off towards the northeast, but essentially still from the far reaches of the south central United States, right through the southern Great Lakes, Chicago, Peely, Toronto. Tons and tons of birds are going to be moving. And if you remember, pretty much the same weather conditions continued for Tuesday. But by now the low that's influencing a lot of this has really started to wrap around. So while you may have southwest winds on the surface, instead of definitively getting birds from Oklahoma blown to Point Pelee, the direction aloft would pretty much mean you would maybe anticipate something from Iowa or Chicago making it to Pelee. But in the same sense, not a lot of birds are moving from the sort of northwest here towards the southeast. It's not really a direction anything wants to go, so it's not going to be taking advantage of the winds in the same way that something will be under a setup like this. So this is what's really going to hone in and tells me that it's Sunday and Monday that are going to be the largest volumes of migrants and probably the most interesting birds associated with it. 24 hours ago, I'm just going to quickly flip through a couple of the maps I really like to look at. The first one is water vapor imagery. So this is all levels of the atmosphere. Right now, nothing has really taken shape yet. This setup is a little atypical for the time of year. A lot of times it's a very well-defined front and a big sort of surge of southerly air. Because this is more of a pressure gradient between high pressure and low pressure, you're not seeing anything too exciting this time, but I'll probably come back to that in other videos. If I'm going to be focusing on the shorelines of the Great Lakes, which a lot of our birding is, I really like the marine forecasts from the Government of Canada. I find it gets the intensity of the wind a little bit better. I sort of feel like there's one big reason for that is, a lot of people, if you're out boating, use this. People's lives are at stake if you're out in a small boat and suddenly the wind whips up to 20 knots. So they tend to be a little more cautious, and a lot of our birding being around the lakeshore the lake and the water does alter how wind flows. So overland, there's a lot of trees and buildings and wind turbines in the way that causes a lot of turbulence, and the wind speed varies. Out over the water, it's flat, so it can really pick up steam. So this is important, if you're on shore and you're looking for birds being pushed to it, or even more so if you're lake watching and you have that wind in your face and you want to know just how strong it's going to be. Under the sort of same breath, there's the operational forecast systems for each of the Great Lakes. I look at Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Huron quite a bit, obviously. And I find these little directional barbs here probably the most accurate for direction. And this whole system is programmed to include influences by the land nearby. So the escarpment around the southern end of Lake Ontario can really influence the wind direction, especially more so a little earlier in the year around March. You can get a lot of lake breezes with the cold differences between the cold water and the warm land. A lot of times in the fall I want to look at this and say, hey, is this wind really going to be out of the east or the northeast, or is it going to be that slightly south of east direction that really reduces the number of yaggers I'm going to see? For this, this is noon on Sunday. I like it in that it shows that, the wind isn't going to be too strong in the morning. If there's a big flight of passerines, if the hawks get going early, they are going to be tempted to do this sort of S-bend around the lake and not head towards Braddock Bay. Unlike, a little later in the day, Monday, where the wind picks up quite early in the morning. So by 4 a.m., we're already looking at a minimum of 15 knots. And you can see it's really extending out quite a ways. So I think for this part of the world, Sunday is going to be a little bit more pleasant in terms of a decent sort of flight of birds. Another one I like to look at is just the Earth null school wind map. There's not a lot different here between this windy TV and the null school maps. Each one uses slightly different display graphics. There's a slight difference between which models you can access. This one sort of came around first, so I have more of a habit of using this one. But inevitably, it's kind of pick and choose. I like how you can really see the difference in the wind here more so than the others, whereas the other one has more of a better overlay with things like precipitation. Another one I really like to look at, just to really hone in on where the precipitation might be, is the Weather Prediction Center short-range forecasts. They really define the differences between the precipitations you might expect. So, mixed chance, mixed lightly, snow, rain, chance of thunderstorms. You get this hatched graphic here. So quite fond of that one. And when it comes time, especially in spring, April and May, and vagrant season, I love taking a quick peek at the Storm Prediction Center's convective outlook. So this is for tornadoes and hail. I don't fully understand the relationship enough to explain in a video, but there's something about severe weather, tornado outbreaks that correlates very, very strongly to rare birds. Pretty sure it has to do with just how the rain is associated with the direction of the winds aloft. I know tornado outbreaks are associated with very strong sort of jet streams shearing the tops of little bursts of convection that can form either a head or get some space between sort of a frontal boundary. So there's something about that strong winds aloft, plus not a lot of rain in the way, that is favorable for thunderstorms. That seems to correlate very strongly with vagrants. How the vagrants get associated with that weather, not 100% sure. But inevitably, I end up back at the models. I talked about this briefly in the last video, but when you're very close to sort of go time for your birding, the mesoscale models are some of the most accurate pieces of information. So most of these maps I already have preloaded to sort of Sunday, Monday. We can see, especially Sunday night into Monday morning, there's some very strong wind barbs here. These are, I think, 60 knots, 65 knots, so you'll get 110, 120 kilometer an hour southwest winds at the 850 millibar level, so a kilometer and a half up. That's the height that birds are definitely going to be migrating at. So it really speaks to the spectacular conditions they're going to have to take advantage of. One other thing I wanted to touch on briefly in this video, which is definitely a lot more theoretical, but perhaps a little bit more fun, especially if you like vagrants, is this sort of theory on birds, like vagrants are originating or coming from wherever this wind originates. So you can see it's quite light down in the Gulf. The really strong winds don't really pick up until more northern Texas or Oklahoma and push into the southern Michigan, southern Ontario. This is very much a theoretical exercise, but something I like to do is I like to go to the Oklahoma eBird page, and I've preloaded this. And look at the bar charts for the region. So I set it to March and April just because we're early in April. And I want to look at which birds are migrating in Oklahoma at this time, because that's going to give me an idea of what I might see or what vagrants are going to be more likely than others. So I've already spent the time sort of scrolling through this list. And I thought a couple species really highlighted this quite well, one of which is Swainson's hawk. Swainsons do seem to come right when we get the very first broadwings in our area, so it's sort of never too early, by April 8th to have a Swainson's hawk in Ontario, and you can kind of see the difference here. So yes, these birds are migrating in mid-March in Oklahoma, but pretty much by now, like the first week of April moving into second week of April, it's a peak migration for these birds in this part of the world. So inevitably, if you get a really strong wind from that direction, and there's a huge number of Swainson's hawks migrating in Oklahoma, I think that's where it can really carry that one bird a little too far and end up in our area. And this contrasts really well with Mississippi kite, which is a vagrant we see year after year in Ontario. But inevitably, there have been no early April records, and it's pretty unlikely we're going to see very many going forwards. And you can pretty much see it in this map here. By early mid-April, there are no Mississippi kites even in Oklahoma. So the odds of one being blown here from Oklahoma is exceptionally low. A couple other species that I thought showed this quite well were sort of Say's phoebe and scissor-tailed flycatcher. So both of these species are known to occur in southern Ontario, sort of ahead of the traditional wave of vagrants. There's a Say's phoebe in northern Ohio right now, and if you look at the map, in Oklahoma, these birds started arriving in the second week of March, and by mid-April, you're starting to see the peak migration of the species. Same thing's true for scissor-tailed flycatcher. They arrive late March. By mid-April, you're almost at the peak. And if you compare that to other vagrants that we see, either quite rarely or regularly, something like western kingbird, they're just barely reaching Oklahoma at this time. The very first birds are getting there. So the odds of one subsequently coming from Oklahoma to here is much, much lower. So I would tag something like Say's phoebe or scissor-tailed flycatcher to an event like this long before I'm going to be expecting to see a western kingbird or Cassin's kingbird. Certainly not impossible, but I think this little exercise helps identify some exciting things that could occur. A couple other interesting ways to view this is to just look at birds that we're expecting at this time of year. So if you do the absolute flip side, winter wren winters in Oklahoma, and by mid-April they're gone. So inevitably, this is why we're seeing winter wren right now, and you can see this in reverse. They are in such a heavy phase of their migration where we are, it really illustrates in reverse here that they've left. Sapsucker was another one, yellow-bellied sapsucker, pretty much leaves right around the same time. And even if you look at some neotropic migrants, one I like to look at is Louisiana water thrush. There's a whole list of warblers, 35, 40 species that have been seen in Oklahoma. But inevitably, the ones that are migrating in March and early April in Louisiana or in Oklahoma are the ones that we have seen here in Ontario quite early. So I scroll down the list, it's like Louisiana water thrush, black and white warbler, northern parula is one I've seen multiple times in early April, mid-April, and I know there are records for Ontario in March, and this really spells it out for you. It's like there are no records of magnolia, no bay breast, no black burnie, and no yellow warblers in March. Parulas migrate early, therefore they have that sort of vagrancy potential, and I would generally associate the parulas that have been seen in Ontario as March is not ones that are early to go to the boreal forest. These are overshooting vagrants from the population that nests in the south. So it's just a fun little exercise I like to do, and inevitably it's not going to work, but I do think it's quite fun. A couple of species that I've identified as the extreme potential, like a one on a decade type bird that you might find if you're birding constantly and you like this sort of thing, is Ferruginous hawk. Clearly it's a species with low population densities, but it looks like they're heading through Oklahoma in March and disappearing in April. So that would be a real outside chance. Long-billed Kulu is one that looks like it just starts to arrive in late March and early April. And finally, Sprague's pipit is another one. So I'm not saying any of these are going to occur in Ontario, but I would certainly consider long-billed curlew or Sprague's pipit is considerably more likely than other vagrants, even regular vagrants that we see here like western kingbird. So that's it for today. I'm going to be out birding. Lots of potential for hawk watching around the Great Lakes. Interesting waterbird movements. Waterfowl, some species are trailing off, but they're all still sort of on the list, and one of the more popular sort of newer types of birding, such as watching reverse migrations at the tip of Point Pelee, I expect will be quite spectacular as well. So hope you have the chance to get out there, and we'll see what everybody finds.